The candles flickered softly on the birthday cake, their little flames dancing against the silence of the enormous dining hall. The room was filled with bright decorations, balloons tied to chairs, and colorful ribbons hanging from the ceiling, yet it felt strangely empty. The table stretched long across the polished floor, big enough for 20 guests, but only one small girl sat there. Her wheelchair was positioned carefully in front of the cake, the soft glow of the candles reflecting in her wide eyes. She looked younger than her age, her face delicate, with a mixture of hope and sadness written across it. It was her birthday, but she was alone. Her name was Emily, the only daughter of a very successful CEO. The house she lived in was more like a palace, with servants, drivers, guards, and shining cars in the driveway. Everything looked perfect from the outside. Yet inside, she carried a heart that felt more lonely than anyone could imagine. She had been paralyzed from the waist down since a terrible accident 2 years ago, and though she was surrounded by luxury, she often felt invisible. The one person she longed to see on this day was her father. He was the man who worked day and night, building companies, making speeches, attending meetings across the world. He loved her deeply, but his presence was rare, almost like a dream she wished for but could not touch. The evening had arrived with so much expectation for Emily. She had worn a pretty dress chosen by her caretaker, a white gown with soft pink ribbons that made her look like a little princess. A tiara sat gently on her head, its jewels sparkling in the light, but her smile did not match the brightness of her outfit. She kept looking at the door, waiting for footsteps, waiting for her father to walk in with open arms, saying, "Happy birthday, my darling." She could almost hear the words in her imagination, but reality was silent. Only the soft ticking of the clock on the wall reminded her that time was slipping away. Emily took a deep breath and looked at the cake again. It was beautiful, layered with cream and chocolate, her favorite. The bakery had decorated it with colorful icing that spelled out her name in elegant letters. 12 candles glowed, marking her age. She closed her eyes for a moment, thinking of the wish she wanted to make. Most children would wish for toys, gifts, or parties with friends. Emily wished for something different, something simple yet powerful. She wished not to be alone. She wished for someone, anyone, who would sit by her side, sing with her, and share the cake, if only for a little while. Her fingers tapped gently on the armrest of her wheelchair as she thought about her life before the accident. There had been days filled with laughter, running around the garden, chasing butterflies, and dancing in the living room when her father would spin her around. She remembered her mother's warm smile, though her mother had passed away when Emily was still very young. The accident had taken away her ability to walk, but what hurt even more was the distance it created between her and her father. He seemed busier than ever, as if the weight of the world had been placed on his shoulders. Emily did not blame him. She knew he loved her in his own way, but she could not help longing for him. Especially today. The silence of the mansion pressed down heavier as the minutes passed. The staff stood in the corners, careful not to disturb her. They respected the fact that it was her special day, but their presence did not replace the love of family. Emily stared at the candles, wondering if she should blow them out alone. A birthday, she thought, was meant to be shared. It was meant to be a celebration, not just of growing older, but of being surrounded by people who cared. Her chest tightened as she felt a lump rise in her throat. She fought back tears, determined not to cry, but her heart ached deeply. She tried to distract herself by looking at the decorations. The balloons floated gently near the ceiling, some in the shape of stars, others in bright colors like red, blue, and yellow. They seemed happy, but their cheer only made the room's emptiness more noticeable. A large banner stretched across the wall with the words "Happy Birthday Emily" written in gold letters. The staff had done their best to make the evening special, but what use was a grand party with no guests? She thought about the school friends she once had. Since the accident, they rarely came to visit. Maybe they didn't know what to say, or maybe they found it uncomfortable to be around her wheelchair. Either way, the calls grew fewer, the messages stopped, and the friendships quietly faded. Emily lowered her eyes to the cake again. The flames looked like tiny stars, each one waiting for her breath to send it away with a wish. She leaned forward slightly, her hands resting in her lap, and whispered to herself, "Please, let today not be lonely." Her voice was so soft that even the staff could barely hear it. It was less of a wish and more of a prayer. The moments dragged on, heavy and slow. The clock ticked again, reminding her that her father was still not home. He had promised, earlier that morning, that he would try his best to return in time. She remembered the way he kissed her forehead before leaving, his phone pressed to his ear, his briefcase in his hand. He had said, "Happy birthday, sweetheart. I'll be back soon. Wait for me." She had smiled then, believing those words. Now, as the sky outside grew darker, she wondered if soon meant tonight, or if it meant tomorrow. She thought about what it meant to have a father who was powerful and admired by so many. People respected him, looked up to him, even feared him in some ways. Yet she was the one who only wanted his laughter, his presence, his time. She imagined what it might feel like if he walked in at that moment, clapping his hands, singing with her, and cutting the cake together. Just the thought made her heart race with both excitement and sadness. Excitement, because she longed for it so badly. Sadness, because deep down, she knew he might not come. The candles were growing smaller now, melting slowly as the wax dripped down the sides. Emily blinked back the tears that threatened to fall, determined to stay strong. She wanted her father to see her smiling when he came, not crying. She wanted to show him that she was brave, even when her heart felt weak. She straightened her tiara with her small hands, lifted her chin, and whispered again, "I'm okay." But in truth, she wasn't. Her loneliness that evening was not just about being without her father. It was about feeling unseen in a world where everyone seemed busy, where children played outside while she sat in her chair, watching through the window. It was about birthdays that were supposed to be joyful, yet turned into reminders of what she had lost. Still, somewhere deep inside her, she held on to a fragile hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, someone would come through the door. Hope that her wish for company would not go unheard. And so, Emily waited. The flames flickered. The silence lingered. The lonely birthday continued. The candles on the cake had burned low, their flames flickering weaker with every passing minute. Emily still sat there, her small hands folded on her lap, her eyes staring quietly at the door. She kept imagining the sound of her father's footsteps echoing through the wide hallway, his strong voice calling her name, his arms wrapping around her in a tight embrace. But the door remained closed. The only sound that reached her ears was the faint hum of the refrigerator in the background and the occasional creak of the mansion's wooden floor. She remembered how birthdays used to be when she was younger, before everything had changed. Back then, her father would take the entire day off, no matter how busy he was. He would hold her in his arms, lift her high, and say, "Today is all about you, my little princess." They would go out for ice cream, play in the park, and invite a few friends over for games. Her mother would decorate the house with colorful flowers, and laughter would fill every corner. But after her mother passed away, and especially after the accident that left her paralyzed, birthdays had grown quieter, lonelier, and less magical. The accident was something Emily rarely spoke about. It was a stormy afternoon when it happened. She had been in the back seat of the car, singing softly to herself, when another vehicle came speeding around the corner. The crash was sudden, loud, and frightening. She woke up in the hospital days later, unable to feel her legs. The doctors said she had survived, but the injury had taken away her ability to walk. At first, she thought it was temporary, that she would soon stand and run again. But as months turned into years, she realized that her wheelchair was now a part of her life. Her father had been devastated, though he rarely showed it in words. Instead, he buried himself in his work. He believed that by building his empire bigger, by making more money, he could secure her future and give her everything she needed. Expensive doctors, therapists, and equipment were brought into the house. Nurses and caretakers rotated daily, making sure Emily was comfortable. But what she wanted most could not be bought. It was time. Time with her father, time to laugh, time to simply sit together and feel like family again. On this birthday evening, Emily thought about that more than ever. The candles were almost gone, the wax dripping down into small puddles on the frosting. She had not yet blown them out. She wanted to wait, just in case her father walked in at the last moment. She wanted to share the wish with him. But as she waited, her mind wandered to memories of her school days. There was a time when she was surrounded by classmates, laughing in the playground, running after a ball, and joining birthday parties with friends. After the accident, things changed. At first, her friends visited her in the hospital, bringing flowers and cards. They promised to stay close, to include her in everything. But slowly, the visits became fewer. The phone calls stopped. The invitations to parties no longer arrived. It wasn't because they were unkind, she told herself, but because they didn't know how to act around her. They didn't understand what it was like to be in a wheelchair. And so, without saying goodbye, her friendships faded. Emily often told herself that she was strong enough to be alone. She had books to read, movies to watch, and a big house filled with entertainment. But deep down, she longed for the warmth of companionship. She wanted someone to talk to, someone to laugh with, someone who would see her not as a girl in a wheelchair but as a friend. That longing grew stronger tonight as she sat in front of the lonely cake. The staff in the mansion respected her space, but their quiet presence only made the emptiness louder. They stood by the walls, whispering to each other, unsure whether to step forward and comfort her. They had jobs to do, rules to follow, and lines they could not cross. Emily did not blame them. She knew they cared in their own way, but they were not family. They could not fill the hole in her heart. Her eyes drifted to the large family portrait on the wall. It was taken years ago, before her mother's passing. She was sitting on her father's shoulders in that picture, both of them smiling, with her mother standing beside them, her hands resting lovingly on her husband's arm. It was a perfect picture of happiness. Emily felt tears rising in her eyes as she looked at it. She wondered what her mother would say if she were here now. Perhaps she would light the candles again, clap her hands, and sing the birthday song with such joy that the whole house would come alive. But instead, Emily had only silence. She leaned closer to the cake and closed her eyes again. "Please," she whispered softly, "let someone come." She didn't know who she was speaking to, maybe to God, maybe to the universe, maybe just to herself. But she felt her heart aching with the weight of her wish. The sky outside had turned darker, with stars beginning to twinkle. The garden lights came on, glowing faintly through the tall windows. Emily watched them for a while, imagining children running through the yard, playing games, and laughing together. She imagined what it would feel like if the house was filled with music and joy. She could almost hear the laughter echoing in her mind, but when she opened her eyes, the room was still quiet. The longer she sat there, the more she thought about her father. She remembered the times when he used to sit by her bedside and tell her bedtime stories, his deep voice making even the simplest tales sound magical. She remembered the way he carried her on his shoulders at the beach, letting the waves splash at their feet. She remembered his promise that no matter what happened, he would always be there for her. She believed him then. But now, his absence felt heavier than the wheelchair beneath her. Emily tried to remind herself that her father was not a bad man. He was not unkind. He worked hard because he wanted the best for her. She had everything a child could dream of: beautiful clothes, a large house, expensive toys, and every comfort money could buy. Yet she would have traded it all for one simple thing, the warmth of her father's presence on her birthday. The candles had burned almost all the way down now. She sighed, realizing she could not wait much longer. Carefully, she leaned forward and took a deep breath. With one gentle blow, the flames went out, leaving behind tiny trails of smoke curling into the air. The room felt even darker without the soft glow of the candles. She sat back in her chair, feeling both relieved and sad at the same time. Her wish had been made, but would it come true? She did not know. For a moment, she closed her eyes and listened to the silence around her. Then, unexpectedly, she thought she heard something. A faint sound from outside, perhaps footsteps, or maybe just her imagination. Her heart skipped a beat as she turned her head toward the door, her eyes wide with hope. Could it be her father? Could it be someone answering her silent prayer? Her heart pounded as she waited, the air thick with anticipation. The birthday that had begun with loneliness now hung in a fragile moment of suspense, as if the universe itself was about to answer her wish. The faint sound grew louder, and Emily's heart raced with a mixture of hope and fear. For so long, the house had been wrapped in silence, but now there was something different: a shuffle of footsteps, a gentle knock echoing against the heavy front door. She turned her head quickly, her eyes wide, her small fingers gripping the armrests of her wheelchair. The staff exchanged curious glances, surprised by the sudden interruption. The mansion rarely received unannounced guests, especially not at night. Emily's chest rose and fell as she waited. Maybe it was her father, she thought desperately. Maybe he had finally come home and was knocking as a playful surprise. Her heart whispered, "Please let it be him." But when the butler opened the door, the figure standing outside was not the man she had been waiting for. Instead, a tall black man stood there, dressed simply, holding the hand of a little girl about Emily's age. His face carried a kind smile, though a little shy, as though he wasn't sure if he should be there. His daughter, with bright curious eyes and a head full of tight curls, peeked from behind him, holding a small stuffed bear. Emily blinked, confused but intrigued. She had never seen them before. The man cleared his throat and spoke politely. "Good evening. I hope we're not disturbing anyone. My daughter and I noticed the balloons outside, and she thought there was a birthday party happening here. She asked if we could come by, just to wish the birthday girl. If it's all right, may we join you?" The words floated into the grand dining hall like sunlight breaking through a cloudy sky. For a moment, Emily was speechless. She hadn't expected visitors, much less strangers. But the gentleness in the man's voice and the excitement on the little girl's face warmed something inside her heart. It was as though her whispered wish had traveled beyond the walls and found an answer. The staff hesitated, uncertain how to respond. It was unusual for uninvited guests to enter the home of a wealthy CEO. Rules and boundaries existed, and security usually kept strangers away. But Emily's voice broke the silence before anyone else could speak. Her lips curved into the first real smile of the day as she said softly, "Yes. Please. Come in." Her words carried a fragile eagerness, like a flower opening after a long winter. The butler, noticing the light in her eyes, stepped aside and let the man and his daughter walk in. The little girl's eyes grew wide as she looked around the grand mansion, marveling at the tall ceilings and sparkling lights. But when she saw Emily sitting alone in front of the glowing cake, she forgot the size of the house. She walked straight to the wheelchair with her small stuffed bear in hand and said cheerfully, "Hi. I'm Lily. Is this your birthday cake? It looks so yummy." Emily's heart melted. Her loneliness cracked open, replaced by warmth at Lily's innocent words. She nodded, her smile widening. "Yes, it's mine. I'm Emily." Her voice trembled slightly, but it was filled with joy. The father stepped closer, bowing his head respectfully. "Happy birthday, Emily. My name is James. I hope you don't mind us coming." Lily was so excited when she saw the decorations. "I didn't want to disappoint her. And honestly, I didn't realize you were celebrating alone. If it's okay, we would be honored to sit with you." Emily's throat tightened with emotion. All day, she had wished for company, for someone to share her cake with, and now here they were, a kind man and his daughter, bringing with them laughter and warmth. She glanced at the staff, who looked uncertain, but she spoke quickly before anyone could object. "Yes, please. Sit with me. I would love that." Lily clapped her hands and bounced happily on her feet. "Yay! A birthday party!" She ran to the chair beside Emily and climbed up, placing her stuffed bear carefully on the table as if it were another guest. James smiled gently, taking a seat on the other side, his tall frame leaning slightly forward to be closer to the two girls. Emily's face glowed in the candlelight. For the first time that evening, the room felt alive. She turned to Lily, her eyes shining. "Do you want to help me blow out the candles?" "Yes." Lily squealed, nodding eagerly. The two girls leaned forward together. Emily's cheeks puffed as she took a deep breath, and Lily followed. With one strong blow, the flames went out, leaving trails of smoke spiraling into the air. Both girls burst into laughter, clapping their hands. Emily's laughter sounded like music after hours of silence, and even the staff couldn't help but smile quietly at the scene. James reached over and gently clapped his hands as well. "That was perfect. Now it's officially your birthday celebration." He looked at Emily kindly. "What did you wish for, if you don't mind me asking?" Emily hesitated, her gaze dropping to her lap. Her voice was soft but sincere. "I wished, not to be alone." Then she lifted her eyes and smiled at both of them. And it came true. James felt his heart twist at her words. There was something in her voice, an ache, a longing that reminded him of his own struggles as a single father. He squeezed Lily's hand gently, silently grateful they had knocked on the door. The cake was cut, and Lily eagerly accepted her slice, her little fingers smudged with frosting as she ate with pure delight. Emily, too, tasted the sweetness, but what filled her more was the joy of sharing it with someone else. Between bites, the girls began to talk as though they had known each other forever. They shared stories about favorite books, funny dreams, and little secrets children loved to tell. Emily told Lily about the time she used to chase butterflies in the garden, her eyes sparkling with the memory. Lily responded by telling Emily about her small school, her favorite teacher, and how she wanted to be a singer one day. The two girls giggled and whispered, their heads close together, their laughter bouncing off the walls like a forgotten melody. James watched quietly, his heart full. He knew what loneliness looked like. He had faced it many times raising Lily alone after her mother passed away. He had worried about not giving her enough, about failing to fill the spaces left behind. But tonight, as he watched his daughter and Emily, he realized that sometimes the greatest gift wasn't wealth or luxury. It was simply being there, sharing a moment, and making someone feel seen. Emily felt lighter with every passing minute. She had forgotten about the empty chairs, the silence, and even her disappointment about her father's absence. In this moment, with Lily by her side and James smiling kindly, she felt the warmth she had been missing for so long. It wasn't the grand birthday she imagined, but it was the one her heart needed. The night stretched gently, filled with laughter, shared cake, and the simple joy of togetherness. Emily thought to herself that maybe birthdays weren't about how many people attended or how many gifts were given. Maybe they were about the love shared in even the smallest of gatherings. The taste of the cake lingered sweetly in Emily's mouth, but what truly filled her heart was not the sugar or the chocolate, it was the laughter echoing through the once silent dining hall. She glanced at Lily, who was smudged with frosting on her nose, laughing freely, and then at James, who smiled warmly as he watched the two girls. The room that had felt so cold and lonely just an hour ago now glowed with warmth and life. For Emily, it was like stepping out of darkness and into sunlight. Lily licked her spoon happily. "This is the best cake I've ever had," she declared with wide eyes. "Even better than the ones at the bakery." Emily giggled softly. "I'm glad you like it. It's from a special bakery. They make it with extra chocolate, just the way I like." "I love chocolate too," Lily said quickly, nodding so hard her curls bounced around her face. "We're the same." The two girls looked at each other and burst into more laughter, as though they had found a secret bond no one else in the world could understand. Emily hadn't laughed this much in years. She felt a sparkle of joy she thought had disappeared forever after her accident. James leaned forward with a gentle smile. "It looks like you two have a lot in common already." His voice was calm and kind, and Emily found comfort in it. She wasn't used to having conversations with strangers, but there was something about James that felt safe, like the steady presence of someone who cared deeply. Emily took another bite of cake and turned to Lily. "Do you have a best friend?" she asked curiously. "Yes," Lily answered quickly. "You?" Then she laughed at her own answer, covering her mouth with her hand. "I mean, I didn't before. But now I do." Emily's heart melted at those words. Her chest felt warm, as though someone had wrapped her in the hug she had been missing all day. "Then you're my best friend too," she whispered, smiling so brightly her eyes sparkled. Lily reached across the table and gently took Emily's hand. "Then it's official." The two girls shook hands as if sealing a great promise. James chuckled quietly, touched by the innocence of their bond. He could see the loneliness in Emily's eyes slowly fading, replaced by the glow of belonging. He had not planned for this night to turn out this way, but he was grateful it had. The cake was soon finished, but the celebration had just begun. Lily insisted they should play a game, though she wasn't sure which one. "We don't need a big playground," she said with determination. "We can make our own fun right here." Emily's eyes lit up with excitement. "I know a game. We can play Guess the Story. I'll start telling a story, but I'll stop in the middle, and you have to guess how it ends." "That sounds fun." Lily clapped her hands eagerly. "Okay, you go first." Emily thought for a moment, then began. "Once there was a princess who lived in a castle. But she was very lonely because she had no friends. One day, she heard a knock on the castle door." She paused dramatically, her eyes twinkling. "Who do you think it was?" Lily gasped, her imagination running wild. "It was a dragon." "No, wait, it was a magical fairy with wings." "No, maybe it was me." Emily laughed so hard she almost fell forward. "Yes. It was you. You came to play with her, and then she wasn't lonely anymore." Lily grinned proudly. "I knew it." James leaned back in his chair, watching the two girls as they exchanged stories and giggles. He could see Emily's face glowing brighter than the candles had earlier. For so long, she had been sitting in silence, surrounded by walls too big and heavy for a child's heart. But now, in the simple presence of friendship, her spirit had awakened. He felt a lump in his throat as he thought about how much this moment probably meant to her. After a few rounds of storytelling, Emily asked, "Lily, do you like music?" "I love music," Lily replied. "My dad sings sometimes when he thinks no one is listening." James blushed slightly, shaking his head with a smile. "That's not true. I don't sing well." "Yes, you do," Lily protested. "Sing for us, Daddy. Please." Emily looked at him with hopeful eyes, her smile shy but encouraging. "I'd love to hear you sing too." James hesitated, scratching the back of his neck. He wasn't used to performing, but seeing the eager faces of the two girls, he couldn't resist. He cleared his throat and began to sing softly a simple lullaby his mother had sung to him when he was young. His voice was deep and soothing, filling the room with gentle warmth. Emily closed her eyes for a moment, letting the melody wash over her. It wasn't a professional song, it wasn't loud or fancy, but it carried a kind of truth and tenderness that touched her deeply. When he finished, both girls clapped enthusiastically, their faces glowing. "That was beautiful," Emily said sincerely. James smiled humbly. "Thank you. I'm glad you liked it." The night continued with more laughter, stories, and little games. Emily found herself forgetting the heavy emptiness she had carried for so long. She didn't think about the friends who no longer visited, or the parties she was no longer invited to, or even the father who hadn't yet arrived. All that mattered was this moment sharing joy with Lily and James, two people who had entered her world unexpectedly but had given her the gift of presence. At one point, Lily yawned and leaned against her father's arm, clutching her stuffed bear. "I don't want to leave," she murmured sleepily. "Emily is my best friend now." Emily's heart squeezed at those words. She wished the night could last forever, that this newfound bond wouldn't end when the guests left. She looked at James, who gave her a kind smile as if he understood what she was feeling. "We won't forget this night," James said softly. "Sometimes, the most special birthdays aren't the biggest ones. They're the ones where your heart feels full." Emily nodded, her eyes shimmering with gratitude. She knew he was right. The mansion, once so cold, now seemed alive with warmth. The laughter of two children, the kindness of a stranger, and the sweetness of shared cake had turned it into something magical. Emily's soul felt lighter, as though a burden had been lifted. She realized that happiness wasn't about the size of the house, the cost of the cake, or the presence of luxury. It was about connection. It was about love. It was about being seen. As the night grew deeper and the candles burned out completely, Emily leaned back in her wheelchair, her eyes heavy but her heart brighter than ever. She whispered quietly to herself, so softly only she could hear, "This is the best birthday I've ever had." The night had grown quiet again, but not the heavy, lonely silence that had filled the house before. This time, it was the soft calm that follows laughter, when everyone feels full and happy. The empty plates of cake sat on the long table, forks resting on the edges. Lily leaned against Emily's wheelchair, her small head tilted sleepily on her new friend's arm. Emily looked down at her, smiling tenderly, her heart fuller than it had been in years. James checked his watch and sighed softly. "It's getting late, sweetheart," he whispered to his daughter. "We should be heading home soon." Lily shook her head, her curls bouncing slightly. "I don't want to go. Emily will be lonely again." Emily's heart ached at the words, though she quickly shook her head. "No, I won't. Not anymore. Because now I know I have a best friend. And best friends don't forget each other, right?" "Right," Lily said firmly, hugging her stuffed bear and Emily's arm at the same time. James smiled gently, touched by their bond. He stood to help Lily gather her things, but before they could move, the sound of a car engine echoed in the driveway. The staff turned their heads, alert and expectant. Emily froze, her breath caught in her chest. She knew that sound. It was the car her father always used when he returned from long days at work. Her heart raced, a mixture of excitement and nervousness twisting inside her. Moments later, the heavy front door opened, and a tall man in a dark suit stepped inside, his tie loosened from a long day. His shoulders were broad, his face tired, but his presence filled the room immediately. The CEO had finally returned. His briefcase hung at his side, and his phone was still in his hand, though he quickly slipped it into his pocket as his eyes fell on the scene before him. For a moment, he just stood there, stunned. His daughter sat at the table, not with tears in her eyes as he feared, but with the brightest smile he had seen in years. Beside her was a little girl, leaning happily against her, and across from them sat a man he didn't know. The air carried the scent of chocolate cake and the echoes of laughter. It was a sight he had never expected, but one that instantly made his heart ache. "Daddy," Emily whispered, her voice breaking with both joy and relief. Her eyes shimmered as she looked at him. "You're here." The CEO's face softened, guilt washing over him. He set his briefcase down and walked quickly to her side. Kneeling in front of her wheelchair, he took her small hands in his. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart," he said, his voice heavy with emotion. "I should have been here sooner. I promised you, and I didn't keep it. Please forgive me. Emily shook her head quickly, squeezing his hands. It's okay, Daddy. I wasn't alone. She turned her gaze toward Lily and James, her smile glowing. They were here with me. They made it the best birthday ever. The CEO looked at James, who stood respectfully, his hands folded in front of him. For a brief second, their eyes met, and the CEO saw no judgment, no arrogance, only kindness. He gave a small nod of gratitude. Thank you, he said sincerely, his deep voice carrying a weight of unspoken appreciation. James nodded humbly. We just happened to be nearby. But your daughter is very special. She made us feel welcome the moment we stepped inside. The CEO's eyes softened as he turned back to Emily. He brushed a strand of hair from her face, his voice trembling. You look so happy, sweetheart. I've missed this smile. I've missed being here with you. Emily's small fingers clutched his hand tightly. Then stay, Daddy. Stay with me more. I don't need big gifts or fancy things. I just want you. Her words pierced his heart. He had spent years believing that success, wealth, and security were what mattered most. He thought if he worked harder, built bigger, and provided more, she would never feel lacking. But in that moment, he realized how wrong he had been. All the meetings, the contracts, the late nights, they had stolen from him the most precious thing, time with his daughter. His eyes grew misty as he leaned closer, pressing his forehead against hers. You're right, Emily. I've been chasing the wrong things. From now on, I promise I will give you my time. I will be here. No more lonely birthdays. No more waiting. Emily closed her eyes, her smile soft and peaceful. That's all I ever wanted. The room grew quiet, filled with the tenderness of their embrace. Lily yawned loudly, breaking the silence, and everyone laughed gently. James picked her up, settling her against his shoulder. We should go, he said kindly. This is your family's moment. But Emily shook her head quickly. No. You're part of it now. You made today special. Please, can we be friends forever? Lily lifted her head sleepily and nodded. Best friends forever, she mumbled before dozing off again on her father's shoulder. The CEO looked at James with gratitude, his heart swelling with humility. You're welcome here anytime, he said sincerely. Tonight, you gave my daughter what I couldn't. And I'll never forget that. James smiled softly. Sometimes, all a child needs is someone to listen. Thank you for letting us be part of her day. The night drew to a close with gentle goodbyes and promises to meet again. James carried Lily out, her little arms wrapped tightly around her bear, while Emily waved happily from her wheelchair, her heart light and full. For the first time in years, she didn't feel the weight of loneliness pressing on her. She felt connected, loved, and seen. When the door closed behind their guests, the CEO turned back to Emily and gently lifted her into his arms, carrying her to the couch. She leaned against his chest, her head resting near his heart. For a while, they said nothing, simply sitting in the comfort of being together. The busy world outside, the pressures of business, the endless calls, all of it faded away. In that moment, there was only a father and his daughter, reunited in the simplest and truest way. As Emily drifted off to sleep, her lips curled into a soft smile. She whispered dreamily, "This was the best birthday ever." The CEO kissed her forehead gently, holding her close. "And it's only the beginning, my darling. From now on, we'll make every day special together." The lights dimmed, the house fell into peaceful silence, but this time it was not the silence of emptiness. It was the silence of love, of promises kept, and of a bond renewed. And though the night had begun with loneliness, it ended with hope, a hope that Emily would never again blow out her candles alone.